So, Hilary Swank, is she white? This might seem like an obvious question, but I'm going to admit I've never racialized her as white. I've kind of racialized her as being from a mixed ethnic background in any movie I've ever seen her in, until I watched the movie Freedom Riders. The kids in the movie literally addressed her as being that white girl. And in my head, I was literally thinking, hold up, she's white? Okay, so I know that they want the character in the movie to be known as white. But wait, is Hilary Swank white? I didn't think she was. But she looks pretty white in this movie. Did they make her look more white? What am I missing here?
I am happy. I am happy. I have a dream.
I got a dream.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
One day.
We gonna work it out.
I have a dream.
I got a dream.
So I knew that when I was thinking this, it was a little bit problematic. Why was it important if she was white or not? What is white? Who is white? Who determines who is white? And again, why is it important? I talked to a few friends and some people who I'm close to, and pretty much everyone said that they racialized her as being white. But for some reason, in any movie I've ever seen Hilary Swank in, I've never really considered her as being fully of like a white European ancestry. It turns out that Hilary Swank's grandmother is actually 80% Mexican and 20% Shoshone Native American, which never seems to ever come up in the land of Hollywood that likes to talk about everybody's personal business. This in itself is really fascinating because if we look at any of the roles in which Hilary Swank has been previously cast in, she's often cast as the unquestionable white woman. This in itself works because Hollywood gives her a certain amount of white privilege, a lot of white privilege actually, and it's interesting how no one actually questions that. But back to pedagogy. So for those of you who've watched before, you know that I like to pick apart movies and deconstruct the pedagogies in which they are trying to communicate. For those of you who don't actually know what pedagogy is, it's basically just the way in which we teach, the way we learn, and the way in which we are taught. And I think Freedom Riders is a really interesting movie to kind of deconstruct the pedagogies that are within it. It's important to point out that Hilary Swank is racialized as white in this movie. In this sense, I can kind of apply the teacher savior that I was talking about last week to this movie as well. Basically, the white chick teacher teaching the racially minority unteachable students, coming to their rescue and saving them and not giving up on them when everyone else has. Problematic. So I want to talk about two different subjects revolving around pedagogy. Firstly, the way in which flexibility impacts teaching. So, for example, kind of the traditional way of going about teaching versus a more flexible, willing to change kind of way of teaching. Hilary Swank is set in her naive new teacher bubble at the very beginning of the movie. She's a brand new teacher set in a class that is kind of known as being filled with a bunch of unteachable students. When she realizes that her way of teaching isn't going to actually teach these kids anything, she's forced to kind of adapt a new way of going about teaching in order to relate to the students. All in all, she kind of makes her teaching style a bit flexible to engage those that she's actually trying to teach. Now, when it comes to the powers that be in the movie, so those who are part of the administration of the school, they have a little bit of a different idea of how students should be taught. There is a system in place based on several years of running an educational facility. Those are the direct words of one of the kind of uppity teachers that Hilary Swank kind of has a tiff with throughout the entire movie. In my opinion, this line actually kind of shows how she's admitting to the fact that there are flaws within the educational system that are based on years of running an educational facility. That this school system is literally just running on this idea of warehousing these kids, as Hilary Swank says in the movie, kind of warehouse them and then push them out eventually just so that they can disappear. It also doesn't acknowledge the fact that different people learn in different ways, and that not all ways of learning are going to be accessible to everybody. So in this sense, this movie actually does a pretty good job of kind of identifying the power relations in these pedagogies. That being said, I kind of want to take a little beef with the way in which Hilary Swank goes about one of her ways of teaching. In essence, she's kind of using the Holocaust and kind of saying, hey, look at the similarities between the Holocaust and between all of the issues that you're going through as racial minorities who people think are disposable. I can understand how that connection's made. I have a bit of a problem with that. I have a hard time thinking that the injustices that Jewish individuals went through at the time of the Holocaust are directly applicable to the injustices and the racism and the Eurocentrism that these students are facing.
Reflecting a tendency to interpret the world in terms of Western, especially European, Anglo-American values and experiences.
And not only that, but the white privilege of the people who are in positions of power who are actually in control of their education. I found it a bit problematic because it still doesn't address that whole idea of white privilege that is such a prevalent theme throughout the movie but is never actually really directly talked about. It kind of really isn't even talked about what it really is.
White privilege can be defined broadly as a right, advantage, or immunity granted to or enjoyed by white persons beyond the common advantage of all others, an exemption in many particular cases from certain burdens or liabilities.
Those are only some of my thoughts about freedom riders. I had a lot more and I took like 2 pages of notes during the movie, but I didn't want this video to end up being 9 minutes long like it did last time, because I know a lot of people didn't watch it because it was 9 minutes. I did really enjoy it, just like I did Good Will Hunting, but I do think that this movie needed to look a little bit more deeper and needed to expand a little bit more on the underlying issues that were very constant throughout the whole movie. But these are just my thoughts. So if you have any thoughts about the movie, or the way in which the movie dealt with pedagogy, or any of the broader kind of issues that were touched on in the movie, please leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching!
I got a dream.
One day.